Hi, Arcfieldweather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Monday morning, October the 14th. We'll talk about a few different items today. First of all, starting off in the tropics, and we'll talk a little bit about a comet that is now visible in the western sky. And finally, we'll wrap up with probably the biggest weather story around the nation over the next few days will be the cold shot of air well below normal across much of the eastern half of the nation. Even the possibility of some snow today in some of those higher elevations of the interior northeast, upstate Vermont, for example, upstate New York, New Hampshire, and we'll talk about that over the next few minutes. Let's start off with a look at the tropical scene. There's a tropical system out across the central Atlantic Ocean. It has about a 50-50 chance of becoming a named system over the next several days. Right here, it is continuing to move on basically a west-northwest track. So far to season, we've had 13 named storms. The next one would be the 14th, and I believe the name would be Nadine. This, again, has a 50-50 shot. We're not quite done yet with the Atlantic Basin tropical season. The number of named storms is a little bit below normal, perhaps, with 13, but the ACE, the accumulated cyclone energy, is a little bit above normal in the Atlantic Ocean. The Pacific Ocean, though, remains quiet right at this time. Nothing in the central or eastern Pacific Ocean going on right now. And again, this is the only system to speak of in the Atlantic Basin at the moment. Well, speaking of the ACE, or accumulated cyclone energy, again, we've talked about this before. This is probably the best best metric to use for determining overall tropical activity. The number of named storms is a little bit less so, because you could have a storm that's totally harmless out in the middle of the Atlantic. That's a named system, whereas 50 years ago it was not named because we didn't have the satellite imagery that we have of today. But the accumulated cyclone energy not only takes into account the magnitude of a storm, but also the longevity. So it's kind of I think a better way to measure overall tropical activity. Now, this top line right here represents the Atlantic Basin, and in parentheses we're seeing the normals for this time of the year. In this particular case, to about the middle part of October, we are now above normal in the Atlantic Basin, maybe 30-40% above normal for this stage of the tropical season. But the Pacific Ocean, which on this particular table that comes from the Colorado State University, it splits the Pacific into two regions, west of the dateline and east of the dateline, both well below normal. Again, the Pacific Ocean is by far the biggest ocean that we have, and it is causing the entire northern hemisphere to be well below normal right here. Current value of ACE and the normal value of ACE in this across the northern hemisphere. So while the Atlantic Ocean is a little bit above normal in terms of that accumulated cyclone energy, the more important ocean, the Pacific Ocean, which has a far bigger impact on global tropical activity, is well below normal and remains quiet in this particular part of the season, the middle of October. Well, before we move on to taking a look at last night's GFS model run, I wanted to point out that there is a comet now that is visible in the western sky. It just became visible in the nighttime sky, in the evening sky, specifically maybe an hour or so after sunset, low on the horizon along the western sky. This is from spaceweather.com. This particular photograph was taken in Europe, in Austria, and it has quite an extensive tail to it. Again, it could be visible, of course, depending on cloud cover, not only this evening, but for the next several evenings. It will become a little bit higher in the sky over each of the next several evenings, and we have about 7 or 10 days or so to take a look at this comet. Again, look after sunset, maybe an hour or so after sunset, in the western sky, especially lower part of the horizon in the western sky right here. And you may see this comet each of the next several nights, of course, depending on local cloud cover. Well, let's take a look at the zero-Z run of the GFS. And again, probably one of the bigger weather stories over the next several days will be this cold wave into the eastern part of the nation. That will produce more widespread frost than we have seen so far this season, and some of the lowest temperatures in the mid-Atlantic region, for example, the Great Lakes, that we have seen so far this season. Here it is right now. There's a cold frontal system that is just now reaching the eastern seaboard. The winds have really increased in intensity over the last hour or two in places like D.C., Philadelphia, New York City, out of the northwest. That is a signal that the front has indeed passed through. Temperatures will go nowhere over the next several hours in that I-95 corridor region, and it will become quite chilly in the overnight hours. Again, each of the next few nights could see some frost in many areas of the Mid-Atlantic, the Midwest, the Great Lakes, and we'll see in a moment on the surface forecast map, there is indeed the possibility of some snow in this particular chilly air mass over the next several hours in some of those higher elevation regions of upper New England and upstate New York as well. Here we'll push through looking at the 850 millibar temperature anomalies, way below normal. This is for the middle of the day on Tuesday, way below normal across a wide part of the eastern half of the nation, from the Central Plains all the way to New England, and it sticks around for a few days. Again, this is some 10 to 15, maybe even 20 degrees below normal for this time of the year. This is the midday Wednesday forecast map, and finally we go into early Thursday and still hanging on along the Atlantic seaboard, well above normal across the northern plains at this particular part of the week, and well below normal across the interior and the coastal sections of the Pacific Northwest later this week. Well, let's wrap up with the surface forecast maps from last night's 0Z run of the conventional version of the GFS. And look at the blues right here. We're seeing some blue right in this region right here. And again, over the next several hours, there could be some snow, probably a mix, a change to snow in upstate New York, the northern parts of Vermont and New Hampshire. Only light accumulations on the table here, but indeed, it's really the first of the season for the interior sections of the northeastern states, whereby some snow can fall, again, over the next several hours through the afternoon hours in this part of the northeast. We'll go farther in time, and that snow widens a little bit, expands a little bit in coverage. Again, this is by midday. The frontal system is pushing off the coast by this particular time, and again, the winds have just begun to kick up in the immediate I-95 corridor region. They will soon pick up right along the east coast following the passage of that frontal system, a stiff northwest breeze, or we go through the next couple of days, and we'll talk about these thickness lines. These dashed lines here represent the thickness of that layer between the surface, 1,000 millibars, in the middle part of the atmosphere, which is 500 millibars, and the thickness lines are correlated to temperatures. Basically, the lower the thickness, the lower is the temperature, and we use this thickness line as an important tool in the winter season. This 540 line specifically is a relatively good line to use for the rain-snow delineation in a particular scenario here. Again, a lot of blue showing up here, southeastern Canada, upper part of New England, going into the middle of the week. But again, we're seeing a lot of blues here in the thickness, now dropping all the way into the mid-Atlantic region. That tells you at a quick glance that this is indeed a chilly air mass. And again, frost is a good likelihood on a couple different occasions over the next few nights here, even in the immediate I-95 corridor region. We go all the way into midweek on Wednesday, and then finally into Thursday, and that cold air is starting to finally pull out here, but colder than normal air is starting to pull out here by the time we get to Thursday, but probably still a below normal day along much of the eastern seaboard. And you can see we talked about another cool shot moving into the Pacific Northwest. That will also include the likelihood of some snow in those higher elevations, in this case across the interior Pacific Northwest. And this is a pattern of strong southwest winds. Winds blow clockwise around highs and counterclockwise around lows, and this is just propelling some very mild air, above normal air, into the northern plains by the middle and latter part of the upcoming week. So kind of a potpourri of items today, from the tropics to a comet to a cold shot into the eastern states. And that's it for now. For ArcfieldWeather.com, this has been meteorologist Paul Dorian.